Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar. With DDMi nearing end of support life, we wanted to hold this session to discuss some of the benefits of migrating to HPE Universal Discovery, as well as cover some guidelines and key considerations for organizations planning to do that upgrade. My name is Anu Pappu. I've been with Configure Consulting for about 5 years now, and over that time worked with dozens of organizations across config and asset management. Presenting with me today is Vlad, who has expertise across the CMS solution suite. Vlad, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Anu. Hello, everyone. My name is Vlad, and I'm a computer systems analyst, and I've been with Configure Consulting for the last 4 years. During this time, I worked on numerous projects with organizations of different sizes across North America, where I implemented, configured, and maintained HPE software products. Some of the HPE software tools that I worked with during these projects include UCMDB, DDMi, Network Automation, OMI, and Sitecode. Also, I am HPE certified for the UCMDB and the Network Automation tools. That pretty much wraps up my introduction. Anu, you can take the lead now.
Okay, great. Thanks, Vlad. So moving on to our first slide, we just want to cover some basic webinar housekeeping before moving forward. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and that all lines are currently muted. We'd ask that you not put your phone on hold or switch to another line while in this session. And finally, on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a question manager. Please feel free to post any questions you may have within that window, and we'll be happy to cover them at the end of the session. So with that, I think we're ready to jump into the agenda. Before actually jumping into the agenda itself, I'd like to take a minute to give you a quick overview of Configure Consulting. We are an HPE software partner focused on the IT operations stack of solutions, ranging from asset management, configuration management, enterprise monitoring, automation, and compliance. We've worked with hundreds of organizations across North America in delivering and optimizing solutions in these areas. Our focus throughout this time has been to support efficiency and top performance in the delivery of IT and business services. And in particular, it's our strength in the areas of asset management and configuration management that make us uniquely positioned to lead today's discussion on the DDMi upgrade, which brings us to the agenda itself. We're going to start out by doing a general overview of Discovery, and in particular comparing the capabilities of DDMi to Universal Discovery. We'll then talk about the evolving or streamlined solution architecture, as well as our methodology for the upgrade. Vlad's going to be doing a live demonstration of the Universal Discovery UCMDB solution. This is going to be something really of interest for those of you who are administrators or users of DDMi today, because he's going to walk through how a lot of the functions that you're used to work in UD. So that includes discovery, data modeling within UCMDB, and integrations. Following the live demo, we'll highlight what we feel are some of the considerations you really want to keep in mind when planning for this upgrade. This includes discussion around administration, probe architecture, as well as integration. And finally, Q&A. Again, please post any questions you may have in that question manager, and we'll certainly cover them at the end of the session. So with that, let's get started with our overview of Discovery. Most of the folks on this call are currently using HPE DDMi. And as you know, DDMi is an inventory discovery tool with both agentless and agent-based discovery capabilities. It is primarily used to capture hardware, software, and OS attributes across workstations and servers. Though additionally, it also has capabilities to do SNMP discovery for network inventory and to connect to vCenter to capture data on physical servers and their virtual guests. Now, HPE Universal Discovery on the right-hand side, as you can see, brings together those inventory, network, and virtual discovery capabilities of DDMi with the dependency mapping and topology capabilities of Universal Discovery Full. HPE UD is actually the successor of the old DDMa product. And so it allows for the option to not only discover the hardware, software, and OS of a node or server, but it also lets us see and really visualize how that server maps into the rest of the infrastructure. Important to note, UD also has a much broader range of discovery capabilities than DDMi does. And that includes discovery of databases, storage, enterprise applications, and much more. Moving on to the next slide, we see that the comparison between DDMi and UD becomes especially critical today with DDMi reaching end of support life and with the migration path being to upgrade to UD. So that's what we'll cover and focus on for the rest of today's discussion. Let's cover licensing first. Organizations currently using DDMi who are covered by HP support can upgrade to UD inventory at no additional licensing cost. So those DDMi licenses that you have do translate one-to-one to UD inventory licenses, which offer more or less the same discovery capabilities. So it's that this inventory and software utilization discovery. DDMi customers also have the option to upgrade to UD Full, which provides the inventory and software utilization discovery, as well as the broader capabilities that we described in the previous slide. So please get in touch with us if you have any licensing questions on the above, including if you've got questions on acquiring additional licenses or upgrading to those UD Full licenses. On the next slide here, we'd like to take an audience poll. So please raise your hand. You'll see an icon on your webinar screen to raise your hand. Please raise your hand if your organization is already using HPE Universal Discovery or UCMDB. Okay, so we see a number of hands going up. And that looks to be about 2/3 of the folks on this call. And that's really consistent with the industry averages and what we're seeing today. So with this said, let's address what some of the benefits of UD are over DDMi, as well as what some of the synergies are for the folks on this call. Key benefits of upgrading to Universal Discovery. Some of the most significant benefits include streamlined discovery, the more robust data model, integrations, and reporting. So we'll cover each of these off at a high level here. For those 2/3 of you who raised your hand, today you're probably managing DDMi as well as UD in separate environments. So streamlined discovery is quite simple in that it allows you to manage both from within a single interface, from right within that Universal Discovery interface. That is really helpful in terms of reducing administration overhead, but also optimizing your discovery scheduling as a whole and troubleshooting as a whole. Also, this brings us to the more robust data model. Having both discovery sources feeding into the UCMDB, we're able to get a comprehensive view of a CI that reflects the inventory level data as well as the relationships and modeling that we get from UD Full. Additionally, many find integrations to be much easier to manage from UCMDB than in DDMi. An important note around integrations. With DDMi, the only way to really get data into the system was to actually discover it. With the UCMDB UD model, we have the ability not only to do that discovery, but also to manage broader integration capabilities for data coming into UCMDB. And this includes a big one, which it's a data source almost every organization has in place, and that is Microsoft Excel. Sometimes we find ourselves managing configuration or inventory data on an Excel sheet for parts of the environment that can't be discovered or segregated business units or what have you. That was a challenge with DDMi because you couldn't tie that data directly into DDMi unless you discovered it. With the UD world, this solution is quite easily addressed by allowing for those types of integrations. The next point is an important one, reporting. Reporting directly out of DDMi has always been a challenge. With the DDMi world, you really did have to push that data that you discovered to another application or system like Asset Manager to do powerful reporting. This changes with the latest version of the software. Today, certainly you are able to do those pushes to do powerful reporting from other systems, and that's quite a common use case. We'll be covering that in a lot of detail in today's presentation. But also important to note, there's a lot of reporting that you can do right from within the UCMDB software. At a high level, you have the ability to schedule inventory breakdown reports, report on changes to CIs or assets that have been discovered, report on comparisons between CIs or groups of CIs, as well as reporting on general configuration standards, which can be very helpful for compliance purposes in addition to asset tracking. So those are some of the high-level benefits. On the next slide, we'll start to take a look at some of the differences in solution architecture. So here we see a representation of the current DDMi world, where you have one or many DDMi collector servers potentially reporting into an aggregator. Aggregated DDMi data is then sent to Asset Manager, or for that matter, any other data source, using HPE Connected. Connected being an ETL tool that facilitates data mapping and integrations between applications or databases. On the next slide, moving into the UD world, we see very quickly that the architecture is different. First thing, right off the bat, we've eliminated the need for Connected with the UCMDB to Asset Manager integration adapter. Here we do happen to be focusing on the asset management integration because that's the most common use case for DDMi. And so it's the one that comes up most frequently in these types of upgrade discussions. That being said, this logic can be applied to any integration that DDMi is currently pushing to, whether that be a homegrown asset tracking database, third-party tool, service desk, etc. We're also able to push that comprehensive CI data that I mentioned earlier, so the inventory, discovery, as well as the relationships out from UCMDB through that single integration. So for instance, for those of you who raise your hand to say you've got DDMi and UCMDB in place today, as we discussed earlier, this reduces your overhead as both sources are going to be feeding into Asset Manager from the same integration point in this model. The upgrade also has some implications for probe architecture. We'll cover this in more detail a little later on in the presentation. So at this point, we are ready for the live demonstration. In this demo, you'll see discovery administration, you'll see the data model more clearly, and you'll also see how integrations can be managed from within Universal Discovery UCMDB. So Vlad, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anu. Hello, everyone, again. So I will start the demonstration by going through the UCMDB and UD interfaces and the different ways of retrieving data from devices using HPE Universal Discovery. Next, I will talk about the new approach that UD takes with managing IP ranges, and that is to split the entire scope of the IP range into management zones. The third topic of the demo is how we can model the discovered data into business applications. And lastly, I will demonstrate how UD can manage integrations with other HP tools and other third-party tools. But before I switch over to the lab environment, I would like to talk a bit about the various ways we can retrieve data from a targeted device. The most secure and straightforward way is to use the Universal Discovery agent. Essentially, in this case, the agent is installed on a device and it communicates with the data flow probe through the proprietary Universal Discovery protocol. So this way is the most secure method since no credentials are required to be stored on the HP tools. The second method of retrieving data from a device is to use the agentless discovery. In this case, the Data Flow Pro manages credentials for the protocols that are used to connect to a device, such as SSH or NTCMD. The drawback of this method is that it is less secure than the agent method because UD must manage the credentials to access all devices. There's also a third method, which is a combination of both agent and agentless discoveries. So in this scenario, if the agent fails, discovery can be recovered using the shell command, part of the agentless discovery. There's also a fourth method to connect to a targeted device, and that is through passive discovery, which is a agent-driven discovery method. So in this case, the agent is pre-installed on a device, and it uses the call home functionality to find a data flow probe. After the call home is received, the probe will create an agent CI and would trigger the discoveries that are enabled for the discovery zone where this new IP belongs. I would also like to mention that the Universal Discovery agent can be both utilized by DDMi server and the Universal Discovery Data Flow Probe. So this functionality lets you upgrade from DDMi to UD in a gradual way, because the DDMi server can still run until the full migration is completed. So this is accomplished because the UD agent maintains two sets of data, one for the Universal Discovery and another one for DDMi. So now we can switch over to the live demo environment. So after logging into the UCMDB user interface, we can observe that the layout is very similar to the previous version of UCMDB. So I'll return to the screen in a bit, but for now, let's preview the Universal Discovery interface. So we can find the Universal Discovery interface under the Data Flow Management menu here, and here we have the module. So a major change that UD has from DDMi is that it has the option of using management zones to run discovery activities. So essentially, a management zone is a region in the network defined by a collection of IP ranges. A management zone does correspond to a DDMi device group, but it is a bit different in the way that it has more limitations than a DDMi device group. We can also see that we have two zones already set up here, and we can notice that there are some discovery activities for each of them. So in this case, let's just pick the Data Center Toronto one, and have a look at the discovery activities that we have here. So we can notice that 4 of the 5 discoveries that we have here are active, while the web server discovery activity is not turned on. Also, you can notice that the IP range that we have selected for this specific zone and the excluded IP address as well, which would be this. Some of the advantages of using management zones are that you're able to limit the scope of the discovery activity to a subset of the entire network. You can also run multiple instances of the same discovery on different zones in the network. And also, you're able to configure each discovery activity instance with different parameters and different scheduling. So for the discovery activities that we see here, we can take we can get an overview of what specific discovery jobs each activity is running and what protocols it's using. So in this case, for the infrastructure discovery activity, we have that it has the option of using these 4 protocols right here. And then we have a few other options for the discovery activity. In the second tab here, we actually see the discovery jobs running part of this discovery activity. So essentially, a discovery activity is it's a group of discovery jobs essentially that focuses on a particular aspect of the environment. And this goes the same for the other discovery activity, where we get an overview with a few details of the discovery, and then we have the activity jobs, which list the actual discovery jobs. So looking at the database activity here, we can see that in this case we have MS SQL Discovery enabled. So we're discovering MS SQL servers. We also have Oracle Discovery enabled, MySQL, and PostgreSQL Discovery. So we're discovering any of those 4 types of databases. So another point worth mentioning is that when IP ranges overlap, it is recommended that we use zone ranking to ensure that the discovery doesn't return unexpected results. So this way, the overlapping IP range that is in the zone with the higher rank is the only one that gets discovered. Therefore, the overlapping range that is in the lower rank zone will not be discovered. So now, after looking at the UD interface and the management zones, let's take a look at how the discovered data is displayed. So let's go back to our IT Universe Manager here. So I'll start by displaying a single CI. So in this case, we'll display a database CI. Let's start with this SQL server here. This one. So I'll start with the single CI, and then we'll branch out to its related CIs up to the business application that it belongs to. So let's just go ahead and display some of the CIs related to our SQL server. And we can see that our SQL Server instance belongs to this Windows server. And we can also see that by clicking the Windows server, we can see all the other related CIs to the Windows server. So one of the major strengths of UCMDB is that you can potentially display all the CIs that relate to the selected CI. So we could potentially display all this information here on the screen or in a text-based display. So let's preview other CIs that are related to the Windows CIs that we have here. So let's just show installed software for this example. And like I said, we can also display the data in a text-based way.
So as you guys look at this installed software data, please keep in mind that this is the data that feeds into your software asset management processes. So whenever you're doing software asset management and you're comparing how much you've purchased to what you have installed in the environment, this is exactly that install data. And it can come from the agent discovery as well as agentless discovery as well. So powerful data for reporting right from within the tool, as well as for doing the software counters and software asset management processes.
Thank you, Anu. So we can also notice, I'll just go back one step here. We can also notice that our Windows server belongs to 2 business applications. So let's go ahead and preview that. So as you can see here on the screen, we have the 2 business applications. One is called Payroll and the other is called Vision. So just again by clicking the, in this case, the business application CI, we can preview the other components of the business application. So now we can see all the servers that are part of this one business application called Payroll. So based on the level of discovered infrastructure and discovered communication in the environment, the UCMDB can model an organization's business application and services to its discovered physical and logical components. So after looking at how the discovered data is displayed and modeled, let's see how other sources of data can integrate with the UCMDB. So let's go ahead and open the Integration Studio. So the UCMDB is capable of integrating with other HP tools and other third-party tools. So let's preview some of these options for the HP tools and the third-party tools. So some of the HP tools that UCMDB can integrate with are Asset Manager, Service Manager, BSM, and you can see the complete list here, Service Anywhere, another UCMDB, and so on. On top of the HP integrations, there's also the third-party integrations. So we can see here the complete list of the third-party integrations, and we have VMC, we have ServiceNow, SCCM, and the ACMDB, and again, you can see the complete list over here. So on top of the HP and the third-party tool integrations, the UCMDB can also import data from an Excel or CSV file, which can be very helpful for companies that maintain their inventory data in Excel spreadsheets. So the most common integration that the UCMDB tool has is the Asset Manager integration. So unlike the DDMi to Asset Manager integration, which requires the use of the connected tool to complete the integration, Universal Discovery, in Universal Discovery, the integration is done directly with the Asset Manager tool. So based on customers' necessities, we can have the integration to be unidirectional. So this way we can populate data into UCMDB, or we can push data to the Asset Manager tool, or it can be bidirectional, where we're doing both activities. So we're populating data into UCMDB and also pushing to Asset Manager. So in this case, I have an example of an Asset Manager integration here set up, and I set up both a population and a data push job. So let's just preview some of the CIs that are getting populated in UCMDB from Asset Manager. So the way that is done, it uses a few queries, and these queries essentially gives us a type of CI that is being populated and a few attributes and information related to that CI. So in this case, we have the node and the location queries selected. But we have the options of removing them or adding other queries to our population jobs, depending on our necessities. So we can see here the other queries that we have. So we can also populate business elements, interfaces, and printers. We have a very similar scenario in the case of the data push job, where again we have queries, and based on these queries we are pushing information to the Asset Manager. So in this case we have two queries selected, one for node and another one for business element. So in this case it's pushing nodes and business elements and information related to these types of nodes. And again, we can add other queries to our data push here. If we, depending on our necessity, we can also push cluster, install software, Oracle information, software visualization. Like I said, these are all the available queries that we can select for data push to the Asset Manager. So this concludes the live demonstration. I will pass it over to Anu, who will discuss the architecture of the Discovery Probe.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Vlad. And as we're making the switch back to the PowerPoint screen here, just want to take a moment to remind you guys to post any questions you may have in that question manager. We already see some coming through that we'll cover at the end of the session. But in the meanwhile, please feel free to post anything else that you may have questions. So now on to Discovery Probe architecture. Key considerations around probe architecture include probe requirements, capacity, and positioning within the network. So the average UD probe does a lot more work than the average DDMi probe. And that includes the agentless discovery, discovery with agents, integrations, and so on. And with that added workload comes a requirement for greater specs in many instances. And for those interested in a specific comparison on specs or infrastructure between the two, please reach out to us following the webinar and we can share some information on the subject. The differences in capacity really depend on the nature and extent of discovery and integrations in place. At a high level, a single DDMi probe can handle discovery of approximately 10,000 nodes, whereas a UD probe in a similar environment may be closer to the 4,000 to 8,000 range, depending on the degree of agentless and agent discovery in place. We'll talk on the next slide about how our team can help you review current discovery, goals for UD, and so on to plan for these requirements. But also, network access is very important. This is something that anyone managing discovery knows all too well. In UD, just as with DDMi, it's really important to place the probes in an area where they can actually access the target discovery environment. With the upgrade, there is a migration script that we use to pull discovery configurations from DDMi into UD. It's a straightforward process that does things like create management zones based on device groups, pulls over credentials, IP ranges, etc. That's something that greatly assists with the probe transition as well. On the next slide, we'll talk about a little bit more of what's involved in getting ready for the DDMi to UD migration. As you can see here, we've created a checklist of things to consider and review internally prior to migration. The first is review of DDMi discovery and probe architecture, as we discussed on the previous slide. So there is a difference in probe capacity and specs for UD than what you had with DDMi. It's very important to chart this out and map out what the new probe architecture will look like to see if there's a need to provision additional servers or capacity. And it's always a good idea to get those requests for additional capacity, if required, submitted and moving well in advance of the upgrade. Next would be migrating DDMi discovery configurations to the UD environment. As mentioned earlier, there is an out-of-the-box script that helps with a lot of this, but there's also a lot of analysis that needs to be done in terms of how to translate device groups into management zones based on changes in your probe architecture and potential changes in the discovery environment itself. Thirdly, we focus on translating the existing connected scenario between DDMi and Asset Manager, or DDMi and other applications for that matter. Here, what we want to do is flag any customizations that are in place and ensure that everyone understands how those would be replicated with the UCMDB integrations. A common one is the asset candidates process. So for that, that's something many organizations have in place, where connected scenarios will push devices that don't directly match with records and Asset Manager to a separate asset candidates table. And then later on, someone may come in and review those devices to determine whether they should match with existing devices, and they'll massage the data accordingly, or they'll determine that this is actually a new device that needs to be created. This is a process that can certainly be replicated with the UCMDB integration. And to be honest, in the vast majority of cases, managing this is far easier in the UCMDB world than with connected. And it's because you do have the ability to use the TQL language, so the topology query language, to support you in this, and manage, to a greater extent, the data itself before it gets pushed into the integration. Next, it's important to establish a phase schedule for agent upgrades and discovery within UD. Anyone who works with UD or even with DDMi knows how important the scheduling can be. We want to ensure that we first upgrade some test agents, validate the data against what's required for key use cases, and then scale out as required. And with any discovery process, regardless of vendor or tool or version, there's always a phase of discovering, troubleshooting, revalidating credentials or access, and then rediscovering. And most of you, I'm sure, are already familiar with that process. UCMDB to Asset Manager push involves using the out-of-the-box integration adapter tailored to your organization's specific requirements. And when we do this, we do an initial push to a test environment where Asset Manager users and administrators validate results, and then we tweak if and when required prior to scaling out that push. And finally, training. This is certainly a critical phase of the migration. System administrators managing discovery and integrations do require orientation to the UD world. Configure Consulting offers a system administrator course for exactly this purpose. And it's highly focused on how to translate those DDMi activities into the UD world, as well as how to optimize discovery and data modeling. So for this one as well, please feel free to reach out to us if you'd like a detailed course overview or curriculum. On the next slide, we see that we've highlighted on average how long it takes our teams to go through this process. It is a fair amount of work to go through the upgrade. Not daunting, not scary, but it is work. And we've done this a number of times with many organizations, both small and large, private and public. And so we've got a lot of lessons learned under our belt, specifically on how to move through these phases quickly, how to troubleshoot and manage when we do bump into the unexpected, and how to optimize the software to meet organizational needs. Every organization is unique, but what we have done is put up some rough averages to give a sense of what the level of effort looks like here. Overall, it's a 3 to 4 month exercise that can vary from environment to environment, depending on the nature of customizations in place, scale of discovery, etc. I also, again, want to bring your attention to the training. This is such a critical piece of the puzzle. UD is different from DDMi, and so it's very helpful for administrators and users to go through a structured training course to learn what those differences are and how to harness UD to fully support inventory and discovery processes. We'd recommend this for organizations who are planning for an upgrade, certainly, but also for those who may be in the midst of an upgrade or who may have just completed that DDMi to UD upgrade and do want some more knowledge transfer to support in day-to-day management. With the next slide, we'd like to highlight some of the key differentiators that we at Configure Consulting believe make us uniquely skilled at performing the DDMi to UD upgrade. Firstly, we have a thorough understanding of the nitty-gritty differences between UD and DDMi, right from discovery capabilities or troubleshooting to strategy and supporting use cases. We also promote best practices with the upgrade, as well as lessons learned around managing timelines, continuity of discovery, troubleshooting issues, and so on. And again, this comes from the background of having a lot of experience in this area. We have experience across all the major elements of this particular upgrade. So that includes DDMi, Asset Manager, UCMDB, UD, and Connected. And having deep technical expertise across these areas can really make a huge difference in the upgrade. Certainly from a technical perspective in terms of facilitating the upgrade, but also in the ability to liaise with the different technology groups supporting these areas, and to implement a solution or framework that takes into account considerations and requirements from these technology areas. And finally, we place a lot of emphasis on ensuring that use cases are met, if not exceeded, following the upgrade. That involves a lot of prep work. It involves mapping out inputs to workflows, processes, reports, and wizards on the output end, and validating that those continue to be supported with discovery and the upgraded data model. So with the next slide here, we invite you to schedule a DDMi migration planning workshop with us for your organization. This is where we spend a few hours with your team to review a lot of the elements discussed in our migration planning checklist, and it's highly beneficial for anyone contemplating the upgrade, as we'll be giving you an idea of what prep work needs to be done and how to effectively and efficiently execute on the upgrade given the specifics of your environment. You'll see my contact information as well as Bob Howitt from the Configure Consulting team listed on the left-hand side of your screen. Please feel free to reach out to either one of us if you'd like to get one of these sessions set up. We're more than happy to work with your team to ensure that you are fully prepared for this process. That concludes the content that we had for presentation here. At this time, we'll start to cover the questions that have been posted in the question manager. Again, for those of you who may have questions that you haven't posted yet, please feel free to post them now, and we'll cover those as well. So the first question here, is it recommended to have UD data flow probes dedicated for agent discovery, or can any probe handle a mix of agent or agentless discovery? Vlad, you want to take this one?
Yeah, for sure. So the UD data flow probe can handle any mix of agent and ageless discovery, as long as the maximum number of nodes on the probe doesn't exceed 8,000. So that's essentially the only counter that you have to be concerned about. So it doesn't matter the mix of discoveries, just the actual number of nodes.
Okay, great. The next question, do the agents push data to UCMDB directly, or does it go through UD first?
So the UD agent communicates with the UCMDB data flow probe directly through the Universal Discovery protocol, and then the data flow probe talks to the UCMDB. So essentially, the agent talks to the directly to the data flow probe.
Okay. Next, it appears that a lot of what you're showing is UD capabilities, UD full capabilities rather. Is that correct? So this would be upgrading from DDMi and DDMA to full UD? Well, actually, in terms of what we saw today, a lot of what you saw is UDI capability, so not necessarily the UD full. In Vlad's demo, the only thing that really would have come up potentially that would be UD full is the fact that we were able to discover a separate SQL Server CI and map and discover relationships, so maybe TCP/IP communication between that CI and other CIs. But other than that, the fact that we're able to discover a server, discover processes, softwares, make, model, etc. on that server, and model it to business applications, all of that can be done from the UD inventory discovery and the natural modeling capabilities of UCMDB. So in that way, it really demonstrates one of the most significant benefits from upgrading from DDMi to UD, even to UDI, which is the ability to do that modeling within UCMDB. Next, we have a question. With DDMi, we know it will not scan Windows VM or AIX other than stating that it is an IP device. Has UD improved the ability to scan these types of devices? And the answer to that is yes. There are specific discovery jobs with UD full that will capture detailed information on the virtual machines and AIX LPARs, giving a lot more information on discovery attributes other than just VPI. UCMDB also tracks parent-child relationships between AIX servers. Next, can management zones be configured by subnet or mask instead of IP range? And yes, they can be configured by individual IPs as well as IP ranges. So that concludes the Q&A session for the questions that have been submitted. We thank you very much for the questions that you submitted. And for anyone requiring follow-up or who may think of questions following this session, please feel free to reach out to either one of us. You see our contact information listed on the screen here. And to conclude, we want to thank you all very much for your attention. Thank you, Vlad, for the demo, and have a great day, everyone.